Hello, everyone, and welcome to Imaging USA Unpacked with Cris Duncan. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Chris's class, the Umbrella Academy, creating unique portraits using umbrellas. Um, Thank you again for being here with us. We're super excited to pick your brain more, ask questions. Attendees, you can drop your questions in the chat, and we're here to follow up with you and as well as Cris. So just don't be shy. I wanted to share a couple of reviews from people who took your class. I figured it would be a good time. And there's a lot of people who are telling me that you're humorous. You got a great sense of humor, Cris. Great humor, entertaining was one remark. Genuinely helpful and informative with great tools to take away and immediately start using. Quote, such great subject matter. Umbrellas have always been a bit of a mystery to me. They're a mystery to me as well, so I can understand.
Great.
Please continue to keep this speaker on the roster, period.
Oh,
Best program of the conference. Excellent speaker, well organized, covered all the material in a timely manner. Love that he was willing to share detailed slides of his lighting setups. Um, Glowing reviews across the board. What do you
I
have
had
to say
my
about that,
I can
Cris?
wipe my brow now. Well, that's very kind of people to write those, and I'm glad they got some value out of our time together. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, would you like to talk a little bit about, give us a recap of your experience at imaging and how this class went down? This was a platform class, so it was a big room full of people. Tell us a little bit
yeah,
more, please.
for sure. Yeah, it was a fun room of people and lots of interaction, some good questions, and some laughter in the audience. So I guess I had a good few jokes that landed. Uh, so
Apparently
it's
so.
that's nice. Yeah, Imaging USA is such a great place, and we've been since 2007. Haven't missed a year. It's always something we put on our calendar to go. Going as a presenter or an attendee, it's something that's always on the list to be a part of. And so one thing that I just remember when one of my first images, and I sat into a class, and this had nothing to do with PPA or the presenter. I just probably picked a class that was out of my league. And it was kind
Uh-huh.
of overwhelming, right? Well, I can't quite do that. I can't afford what they were doing. I don't have the technical know how of what they were showing, and I didn't really have the equipment. And so, one thing when I started teaching and sharing and expanding that part of our, I guess, our persona, our business is leaving people with a sense of something that, I mean, you can do this.
Hmm.
You've got the ability within you, first of all. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can still create great images. And that's where the Umbrella Academy came from. Most people, if they buy a starting light kit, chances
Hmm.
are it's probably coming with an umbrella. And if it doesn't, you can get them for less than 150 bucks, really, really good ones. Some are even less than that. And
Amazing.
so that's kind of the point of this. It's just they're easy to they're easy to carry, they're easy to set up, they're easy to take down, they're inexpensive, and you can start using them immediately.
I love that. And it sounds like, based on what we had chatted about previously, this came after your 2023 class that was one light, 10 portraits that did really
Yeah,
well. And you
yeah,
received very good feedback on that. Because of that, sounds like because of that element of this is something you can do.
hmm,
You don't need to be a millionaire to afford all this stuff. You just need one
right.
light. You just need one umbrella. Um,
Hmm.
could you tell me a little bit more about painting on the umbrella, like painting on the umbrellas and what that kind of what
Oh,
that entailed in terms of,
painting on the umbrella. Oh, I don't. I should have it with me out here, and I
oh
don't.
gosh, I should have warned you. That this is just top of mind what's coming up for me.
That's okay.
Um,
So I don't even know if I have a slide that kind of.
uh-huh.
Let me see. Okay. Well, these are the slides, and at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the webinar, I'll have a QR code where you can scan the screen if you weren't in the program or
Ah,
you missed the slide deck. So
okay.
umbrellas. The good thing about umbrellas is they kind of put light everywhere, and kind of one of the negative things about an umbrella is it puts light everywhere. Um,
Yes.
and so it's just a little bit harder modifier to control and narrow down to specific areas, like which
Hmm.
you would get with a softbox. So I just put a diffusion panel over my umbrella, which is a very common thing that photographers do. And I painted with fabric paint that I just found at the hardware store. I painted that diffusion panel. What you see on the screen, I painted one, I call it my half moon. I painted one
Uh-huh.
where it was strips on both sides, so I had a small sliver of light in the middle. And it's just to eliminate the light from going everywhere and trying to bring it into a more narrow area of my scene. So, but yeah, I got a little bit of like, what? Who's and ahs for that one. So I can't believe I don't have.
So you're telling me that you're showing up to your local Joann's fabric store and getting some of this fabric paint and then coming home and figuring this out yourself? Like how did you learn this from someone else or was this your own kind of invention?
Well, I've seen they make what they call a mask. They make masks for soft boxes that you can Velcro
Mhm.
on that could change the shape of the softbox. And I said, surely there's something for an umbrella, and there wasn't. And so I just kind of did the DIY
Yeah.
version. And
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't go to Joann's. I found this at the hardware store, but Joann's probably
Okay.
has it too.
Okay. I kind of like
Joann's
that. I
probably.
like that image. Um, the someone in the chat they're asking, Chris, you mentioned some affordable options in terms of umbrellas. Do you think at some point when photographing with umbrellas, it's worth it to get the more expensive options, or should you just stick with what you started with?
That's a good question.
Hmm.
And it just comes down to kind of you get what you pay for. If you do a
Uh-huh.
lot of work on location, if you're going to be folding this down and throw it in the back of your car and going and setting it up and then throwing it in the back of your car or in a wagon, then I would opt for the more expensive one. You're just going to get a longer
Okay.
life out of it. If it's
Okay.
going to be something you set up in your studio and probably leave there, would
Hmm.
not mess with, I think you can get by with the less expensive one. So.
Interesting. So the process of breaking down the umbrellas, it's kind of it sounds a little bit like cumbersome, I'd
Well, it's just the
imagine.
construction quality is really what you're paying for, the
I
material
see.
quality. So not,
I see.
there's some umbrellas that have different functionality as far as they're deeper and and different sizes that could elevate the price. But if the question's based on kind of a standard umbrella that might come with the kit, then
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
anything
what they
under
were
120 bucks, you're getting a good one, I'm sure.
getting. Well, I like that. Um, so when we chatted earlier, you kind of talked about breaking up this session into like these bite-sized, attainable chunks of
Hmm.
information. I guess I'm curious, and I'm kind of waiting for. Please, people, if you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. But in terms of what I'm curious about, since we're having this conversation, like, um, in terms of, I guess for a, I'm kind of interested in terms of depending on where you're at in your journey with photography, if you're comfortable with these more complex lighting setups, like the stuff that John Grass is doing, where there's a
Hmm.
light here, there's a light here, there's a light. When, like, depending, like, are are buying multiple umbrellas like can you you're saying the light is very diffuse. Is there a way to really like use the umbrella, like use this painting technique to essentially like create something that can like have the effect of another more expensive lighting solution? It's kind of what you answered earlier, but I guess I'm curious in the long run if photographers transition away from using these, or if this is something that you can always use.
Well, that's quite a question to unpack.
Yeah.
I think you can. Umbrella is always a source that you can use. Um,
Hmm.
and just to clarify for the audience, I got this question after the class in Louisville too. Was do you only use umbrellas? I'm like, no. I still have
No.
other modifiers. I still have other light sources and tools at my disposal.
Hmm.
But for this 90 minutes, I wanted to share what you could do with some umbrellas. So,
Okay.
um, and no one really knows. I mean, what's off camera, what's off screen, I guess you could say, on your image. If it produces a light quality you like and can illuminate your subject in the way that you feel is flattering and pleasing, then I don't think it really matters what it is. Um,
Okay.
the difficult thing with umbrellas is trying to control the spread of the light because it just sends out a large area of light. It covers a large section of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I painted those panels to try to narrow down or minimize that amount of real estate that it's impacting the scene.
Mm. I think seeing this in person might help me understand it better. That's the next. That would be the next phase for me to understand it. But other people that attended your class have a much deeper understanding of it, which I love.
Yeah.
Um, I guess another question that I had kind of in the back of my mind that I loved your perspective on it was this essentially this revisiting of knowledge in terms of like how we learn and how we
Mm-hmm.
build skills. You mapped it out as this kind of three pronged way of thinking about it, as in like the will, the skill, and then refill. I would
Yes,
love it if we could chat a little bit more about that to our audience. And yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I call it will,
Hmm.
skill, and refill.
Hmm.
And you know, first of all, you have to have the will. So if someone was in the chair, they had the will to try to learn something new, right? That's the
Uh-huh.
first point. So obviously, being at imaging and being in the chair constitutes that.
Yes.
There's probably a skill you're trying to acquire, or maybe a skill you're trying to hone, which we always do, right? So that's the skill part. And most people think, oh, I went to imaging, I sat in the chair, and I learned some stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not enough. You have to refill it. And what I mean by refilling it is almost like repeat, rinse,
Yes.
wash, rinse, and repeat. You have to go back to that will to say, okay, now I'm going to practice that skill that Chris or John or Dan or
Hmm.
Angela or Elena taught me, right?
Yeah.
And you keep refilling it. And just like to use example, I think you're a musician. We talked about this, before
Yeah.
we started. I could go to my guitar when I was taking guitar lessons. I could go to my guitar teacher's studio. I had the will to get there, right? I paid for it. I put the guitar, and he goes, "Okay, we're gonna learn this song. We're gonna learn Blackbird by the Beatles. Okay,
Hmm.
great. It's in
Classic.
the key of D. Okay, great. Okay, I learned Blackbird. It's in the key of D. He told me. He showed me the sheet music, right?
Yeah.
I cannot learn that song in one setting. I can maybe learn the first few motions, and I have to
Yeah.
work on that, and then I can go to the next and refill my skill until I can play that song, which I feel would be masterfully. It's based on your skill going in. It could be a long time, or it could be a short amount of time. So that's kind
Yes.
of the concept of refill. So there's probably some students in the class that they could maybe only grasp this much, and I taught this much. So they need to work on this, and then they can keep refilling until they get to there. Some were maybe already there, and they have a smaller gap to make up for that, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
absolutely. Absolutely. That makes sense. It reminds me of this learning method I was taught about years ago, and it's basically just to get yourself outside of your brain and learning more, picking up a dense scientific magazine, like a medical journal. I'm not even kidding, and practicing reading an article every day or every other day. And like the first few days, you're gonna absolutely understand nothing, and it reminds me of kind of what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps it's another facet of that. You have to expose yourself to these types of learning occasions where you don't understand what's going on around you, and it's all kind of like Greek to you. And then
Mm-hmm.
eventually you're going to start to learn the language. You're going to start to understand it. It's going to make more
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the goal of any of our craft, whether it's music or science or photography, is
Hmm.
trying to help it become second nature.
Hmm.
And, sometimes the creativity comes instinctively for people. Sometimes it's the technical side of the craft that comes instinctively for people. Some are blessed to have both and do that. Um, but yeah, you've got to make it where it becomes second nature. And I think, and I'm really people say I'm a technical shooter and a technical teacher, and I probably would agree with that because I think
Mm-hmm.
once I feel like people feel like they go in different directions. Like, well, I just want great emotion, and my technical can be this way. Well, I actually have a slide
Mm-hmm.
for this, right? It's kind of like,
Mm.
oh, they're all disconnected. I'm going to work on my business, and that has nothing to do with my technical abilities. Or I want to be just an artist, which has nothing to do with my sales, right? And so we kind of feel like we're going in all these different directions. When in
To
reality,
compromise.
right? When reality,
Uh-huh.
and forget it says lighting for sales, but reality is when we can
Uh-huh.
align the technical part of our craft, which is where most people get bogged down, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
they get bogged down in the technical. When that gets aligned, then everything moves in the same direction. And that becomes a catalyst for all these other
Huh.
parts of our craft. So
So you're
little
saying that
diversion.
those elements aren't disconnected, is what you're saying.
Correct. Correct.
Interesting.
Because if you're
Why?
confident, if you're confident in your technical ability to create an image you can see in your mind or see on the paper and recreate it,
Mm-hmm.
then you don't get caught up in the gear or the how to. Now you can focus on how to take that and make it creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can make it creative, I'm using the artist side of my brain, which satisfies that desire I have inside. And then if I
Mm-hmm.
do that, I hopefully please the client through that, which then can make my sales go better.
Hmm. Sounds kind of like that's like the momentum of one thing being
Yes,
strong kind of carries over into all these other
it,
areas.
it can become a catalyst for the rest of those things to grow.
I like that a lot. That's so helpful. Someone,
So,
Edward in the chat asks, why shouldn't we always rely on our light meters on our cameras to tell us if we're exposed properly? Why are we
hmm.
over, why are we exposed sometimes when we rely on the camera's light meter? This goes way beyond my understanding of anything, so you'll have to help me out there. I'm just a
I'm trying to
writer.
think. I probably have a slide somewhere. That's why
Uh-huh.
I think
So like they're asking
in
why
there.
why why shouldn't we always rely on our light meters to tell us if we're exposed properly? Why are we
Yes.
overexposed when we rely on the light meter?
Okay. Well, and
Hmm.
he said in the camera, inside the
Mm-hmm.
camera. So,
Light meter on our
um,
cameras, yeah.
right. Two different
Uh-huh.
things. There's one big Edward was the name. There's one big concept,
Yeah.
Edward, with that to grasp. Is the light meter in your camera is a reflective meter, so it only can measure the light reflecting or bouncing off of a subject. And
Mm-hmm.
so just think if you had a subject wearing white or something light colored, and then a subject next to it wearing something dark. The white
Hmm.
clothes is going to reflect more light back to the
Mm-hmm.
camera.
Mm-hmm.
And so the camera just tries to make all of those values back to middle, which would be 18% gray or just middle gray. And so if so that's the main thing you need to understand about your camera meter is that's what it's looking for. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I prefer a handheld meter that I can use at my subject because it doesn't measure reflective light. It measures light that's hitting it, only the light at the scene. So it's has no
Oh,
bias towards tonality or color or reflectivity. So,
okay.
and that's a
Wow.
question that's going to would really take us beyond our time today to really deep dive into. But
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds
um,
it sounds like so that light meter is the weird little like it looks almost like something off of Star Wars. It's this little has this
yes,
little funky gadget look to it. Yeah,
uh-huh.
that's the light meter. Okay.
It kind of
I'm
looks like a
I'm
phone with a little moon on the top of it.
it does. It does. Okay.
It's,
How interesting. Gosh. Oh, Edward also asks, will there be a replay of this? Yes, you can go to imagingusa.com/unpacked. All of the replays are there, and also on Professional Photographers of America on our YouTube channel, you're going to find all the replays. So please subscribe and rewatch there.
and Edward, let me give you one more tip. If you're not
Hmm.
ready to invest in a handheld light meter,
Hmm.
go to the camera store, order off Amazon if you need to, but a 18% gray card if you don't have one already. You
Hmm.
can use that to get your meter because it's already gray, so it's not going to try to correct the light meter in your camera to something else. So use a gray card to get that base exposure, and that will work if you're using TTL flash or ambient controlled lighting. So it's
Hmm.
like a $10 thing that's really helped you a long way.
Oh, and I see another question came through. Um, silly question. This person says maybe a silly question with the umbrellas and lights. Does it get hot for the models under all the lights? If so, how would you recommend keeping it cool and checking that the temperature is okay for them? It's a
Well,
great question.
that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't think it gets uncomfortable for the models anymore. Most of the lights, if you're using I'm using a strobe, but there's a modeling light inside it that
Hmm.
is usually LED or maybe it was a halogen, but it's not a high wattage. So yes, if you touched it, it would be hot to the touch, but it's not enough
Uh-huh.
heat that's going to dissipate onto your subjects. So,
Okay. Wow,
yeah.
interesting. I mean, I imagine too that focusing under direct light might get difficult over time. Do people get fatigued standing under these lights for you and then looking at a camera and smiling and
I think people get camera fatigued for sure.
okay.
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
Um, back to your little your moment, your teaching moment on the
Okay. Yep.
skill
Will
refill.
skill and re-
When did let's for instance, when did shooting or photographing families become the all of the aspects of like a family or a senior photography session? When did that start to feel more second nature and comfortable for you in your career?
Okay, let's see.
Curious, just to give
Yeah.
us a little bit of background, because
Probably, I would say it was around 6 years into it,
okay,
which is a lot of time, right?
it's a long
We're in
time.
20 years right now. We're in our 20th year. So the first quarter of it, I guess that's a little more than the first 25% of it
Yeah.
was trying to gain the skills that I felt like I wanted and that I needed to be able to be successful. And I was just getting frustrated because I'd see something in a magazine or I'd see something another photographer created. I'm like, I want to be able to do that, but I don't know how
Hmm.
to do that. So I had to keep visiting a lot of instructors several times, right? That will skill and refill just a little bit more, a little bit
Hmm.
more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And when I started implementing it, it probably when I finally felt okay, I understand now. I understand what I need to do, and I understand it wasn't just a knowledge base; it was an understanding of what it's going to do. But
Hmm.
now I've got to pull it off. It took about a year from when I felt like I could recite it to you and I could be correct.
Hmm.
I could answer any question on a test and be correct about the light and the science of it and all of those aspects, the scientific properties of lighting. But to pull it off took more time. And so I needed an assistant to help keep the client entertained because I'm having to mentally run a
Uh-huh.
checklist like, okay, I need this here and it has to be this and it has,
Yeah.
which can be a little disconcerting for a client and can be a little boring for someone. So having another
Yeah.
person there helped kind of keep the mood going. And that's what we encourage a lot of our students. If you're struggling with this, the best people to do this are the kids that take your order at Chick-fil-A. I mean, they can talk to anybody.
True. True.
So, yeah.
It makes me think of the difficulty in you might know something pretty well for yourself, but when it comes
Mhm.
to teaching somebody else the concept, it can be it
Sure.
can make you realize how little you think,
Yeah.
how little you really know in
Yeah.
terms of explaining it to someone else. I wonder, in terms of you becoming this educator that you are today, um, have you had little imposter syndrome moments of being like, I'm teaching people this thing right now that I was lost and confused on for for X amount of years?
You know, I don't think I've ever had imposter syndrome. There's times I've been nervous.
Uh-huh.
There's times I've been anxious. You know, when you see your mentor in the back of the room that taught you a lot of these things, that can be a little unnerving. But
Yeah.
I think it's no different than when I tell my daughter, you know, if
Hmm.
you're or what I try to tell our students or even ourselves, if you're talking about stuff you know, you shouldn't be nervous. It's only when you hit a bar ditch on either side of the road where you try to exaggerate or go beyond what you're really trying to do is when I think
Hmm.
I think audience can see through that. I think the audience can see, your authenticity and if you know it or not. So
Hmm.
I don't feel imposter syndrome because I really believe I know this, right? And if someone wants to tell me a technique that I can learn from, that's great. But
Hmm.
what we teach and what we do has been proven over and over and over again to be successful. So
I love that. You're like, this stuff holds up. I'm not afraid it's going to fall
yes,
down. I've built a
yes,
strong foundation. I love that.
yes,
I love
yes,
that.
yes.
Do you have something you
So
want to show us? I'm seeing this slide. By the way, I love that. I love that saxophone player. It's a great shot. I love
thank
it.
you. Well, we've kind of revisited this will, skill, and refill, and I think all these kind of things go together in that whole process. And learning is insufficient. That's what I was saying before. You
Hmm.
just sitting in that chair is not enough, right? That's
Yeah.
great. That's a great start, but that's not sufficient. Doing it and practicing is where it's going to manifest. So I'd encourage anyone just to, and it's tough to practice in front of a client. That's why
Sure it
that's
is.
why there's practice with find a local community network. There's hands-on classes at Imaging USA every year. There's affiliates or networks, community schools across the country. There's um, get some friends together and do it in one of your studios and practice these techniques. That's where it's going to manifest. That's where you're really going to make the progress. So when I was teaching
Yeah.
my daughter how to drive a stick shift, we didn't go to the street the first thing. We had to go to a parking lot, right? To learn that. We're not like, oh,
That's
we're
an
on the we're on
idea.
the highway now. Let's figure out how to drive. No, we had to practice it, and it was small little steps there.
Hmm.
So
I mean, I would imagine too that there are people out there that want their picture taken, or maybe aspiring models and people that are willing to, if you disclose
absolutely,
where you're at, um, that they would be willing to sit through you go through the mental checklist, or maybe the
yes,
actual checklist of what you need to do
yeah,
for that session. But yeah,
for sure,
practice is
for
where it's
sure.
at. It's so
Yeah.
true. Mm, wow. Well, it's like Edward writes, best way to get yourself out there is what is it? Best way is to get out there and get jobs. Absolutely.
hmm
Mm. Well, I'm
Do the
curious.
work. You have to do the work. Our friend
You got to
Angela
do
would
the
say
work.
that. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, and I also just love this component of what you're saying is, which is, if you share what you know, you should never be nervous about it. Is
hmm
something that you said previously, and I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do
Um,
they say? An honest
so
person has nothing to fear, right?
yes, yes. I just want to let people know. So we're kind of nearing the end of our time here. If there's any leftover questions, let us know. I did want to give you the opportunity, Chris, to share a diagram slide you mentioned earlier
Oh,
for
yes.
for all the people.
Yes. Thank you for that. So, if you were at the class in imaging in Louisville, you saw this on the screen, but you can scan that QR code you see on your screen now, and that will take you to the slide deck that I presented at that program and another PDF of all of the lighting diagrams, plus a few bonus ones that we
Mm,
demonstrated on stage live. So you can have those diagrams, some written instructions, and all that's free. You'll go if you scan that, it'll take you to our educational site. Click free preview to get the free content. There is some
mhm,
premium access where I do a session in my studio. If you happen to miss Imaging USA, I do a full session in my studio using these concepts with umbrellas, with real clients. There's a
Nice.
few other, we go into some of this lighting and exposure, like it would answer Edward's question. We go into some of that more detail. There is some of that
Hmm.
premium access if you just need to go deeper into your education and learning on lighting. But if you just want the diagrams and stuff we did, the free preview will take care of that.
Love that. If an attendee had a question to ask you, kind of outside of this, is there a way that they can get in contact with you or drop a social media question? I don't know if you
There
answer
is.
DMs. Just curious though.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, that answers your question, Edward. Edward is a star student today.
Oh,
I love it.
fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah, of
Well, thank you again for your time and generosity in being here with us today.
course. Yeah,
Um, Wishing you a happy rest of your week, everyone. Thank you for attending and being present with us and learning something today, and getting that reminder that learning is not enough. You need to get off
yeah,
out of your seat and go practice. So
yes.
that's what I'm going to do too. That's a great reminder. Thank you
Well, thanks
again.
for having me. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
thanks
All
for everyone
righty.
attending. So,
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you
bye.
again.